Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Well, I'm very delighted to actually have Francine Segan back to join us today onto the program. She and I finally met in person this past weekend at the National Italian American Foundation Gala. And for us who are indeed interviewing people, we always feel that we are their best friends. And she was very gracious. Not only we were able to take a picture together, but also to schedule this additional conversation together because Francine is a wealth of information about, as a food historian, established cookbook author, and she gives talks and presentations. She is indeed the person you want to go to ask what's the latest and the greatest in the Italian food business. Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Francine, welcome back. Welcome back.
Wow.
So it's always, it's always a pleasure and an honor to follow what you have been writing about, talking about. And when we saw each other the other weekend, I told you that you were indeed just in my dreams, literally, because we have the Barbara Seville currently going on in here in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Opera. And I love your Opera Lovers cookbook, and there were a couple of recipes for Figaro that I will be presenting in my little videos on Fridays. So Francine, where do we start? Where do we start? I think I would be always curious. It's always curious for our audience to find out a little more about our guests. And specifically, how did you get into writing about food and, again, becoming the expert with a capital E?
It all started actually with my first book, Shakespeare's Kitchen, about the Elizabethan period and the Renaissance. I was a child psychologist before this, and my son came home from school one day. He was studying Shakespeare in 4th grade, and he said, "Mommy, what can we do to make this more fun?" And he knew I love to make dinner fun, and so he said, "What did Shakespeare eat?" And I thought that was such a great question, and so I went to the library, and there was a cookbook that was published in England during his lifetime, several cookbooks. So I came home and tried some recipes, and my daughter helped. We turned out the lights and ate by candle, and it was really fun. And my son told the teacher that they did something in the class, word spread, and then Random House asked me to do a book about it. So it was a wonderful good fortune to start with my first book. And then after I did several books on historic topics, I really wanted to do something on Italy. And then my editor said, there are 300 books a year on Italian food, too many. There's nothing new. And I said, "That's not true. There's so much old that you don't know, so it's new to you." And so I invited her to dinner, and I made some dishes that I told her if she knew any of them, I would stop bothering her. And out of the 12 things I made, from appetizers to dessert, she knew none, because Italy has such a rich history of so many regions, so many provinces. And so she let me do my first book, Dolci, Italy's sweets. And then right after that, because that was a big hit, she had me do a book on my favorite food group, pasta, for my book, Pasta Modern, which is about the last 25 years of recipes in Italy from chefs and nonnas and food bloggers, but also some recipes that we don't know in America.
Yeah. And also it's very interesting because, I mean, obviously you travel to Italy, have traveled to Italy extensively. And so you're very fortunate to be exposed to the variety of regional foods. And it's almost like an oxymoron to talk about Italian food because the regional differences between one region to another, sometimes from one little town to another, from one family to another. So it's, the umbrella is very, very open, but there are so many different nuances, and also capturing what has happened and what is happening now. I think it just gives a nice continuous experience of how food evolves. Some of the dishes there might be considered the capostipiti, the staples, and how today's chefs have elevated those dishes. So I don't particularly care for the expression cucina povera, because no one wants to think that back in the day there were poor people. Maybe they didn't have a lot. I like to, maybe I'm going to start a new movement. I would like to call it cucina di altri tempi, the cooking of the past, of the other times, to kind of bring the dignity that those dishes really, really, really deserve. Let me see. You have the gala, but also in previous conversations this year, Emilia-Romagna has been one of the regions that got a lot of highlights and press. You also are big. You have a wonderful talk about slow food and fast cars.
Yeah, I love Emilia-Romagna, which was the region that was honored by the National Italian-American Foundation, the gala that we went to. That was the region of honor for this year. And it's just a region that I don't think is as known as it should be, because it has so many treasures and so much good food. It has more of the DOP and IGP products than any other region. And so it's a wonderful place to visit and to eat in.
And the next year is going to be Friuli Venezia Giulia again, a region that I thoroughly visited and enjoyed this past summer. So a lot of things to talk about that region. But this is going to be a sweet conversation, isn't it going to be, Francine?
Talk about a topic that I find fascinating, and that is Italy's chocolate history. I think it's very interesting, and I hope I share some things that perhaps your listeners haven't heard about before.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where would you like to get started?
Well, let's start at the beginning. Chocolate is originally only from the Americas, Central and South America. It wasn't anywhere else. Cleopatra had fabulous dinner parties. She never served chocolate. The Buddha got chubby on something else. No chocolate in ancient Asia, ancient China. Renaissance children could have been as angelic as you can want. No chocolate until Columbus, who, on his 4th trip to the Americas, discovered chocolate. He encountered it. He brought back sacks of it to Queen Isabella. And so that was the first documentation of cacao beans going into Europe. And from there, from Spain, it went immediately into Italy, where they created so many things. The Italians looked at the cocoa beans and they said, wait a minute, they're not a bean, they're a seed like fennel, cumin, coriander. And so they knew the way that the Spaniards were making a drink, but instead they said, okay, the drink is wonderful, but what about if we don't grind it to a pulp? What about if we just grind it the way we grind pepper and we use it in cooking? And so they started to create many, many sweet dishes, like the Italians invented chocolate sorbet. But this is what blows your mind. They were the first to cook savory dishes with chocolate. Not the Mexicans with mole. That was much later, after the Spaniards came back to conquer that territory. It was the Italians who played with this wonderful ingredient and realized it's not sweet until you add sugar. If you've ever tasted nibs, you know that chocolate is not sweet.
Yeah, I wanted just to share a picture. I was actually in Costa Rica last year, and I went to a cocoa plantation, and I had never seen a cocoa bean. So for those of you who will be viewing the interview, this is what it looks like. And it's the most delicious. It looks like garlic, but it has nothing to do. It's the most delicious pulp that you can ever taste, and then you kind of suck in, so to speak, the pulp, and then discard the seeds, which, you know, then there is a fermentation and everything. But I was really surprised to see what a cocoa bean look like. So sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to
Oh, that's very important because it looks like corn on steroids when you first look at it. And that wonderful whiteness is the fruit of the cocoa pod. And it's the pits, the seeds, the cocoa bean that they discovered thousands of years ago, the ancient Aztecs and Mayans. They must have been eating the fruit, maybe sitting near a fire, spitted out the seed, and then they maybe smelled it in the fire, toasting a little bit. And they said, wait a minute, that smells amazing. They picked it up from the fire, started chewing it, and realized, oh, this is delicious. And just like when we chew in our mouth, they ground things. And they said, wait, we can grind this like we grind dried corn and make a pulp, and that they used for a drink. That was a sacred drink for them. So, but if you ever get a chance to go to a cacao plantation, it's a must, because you can't have that fruit anywhere else in the world.
Indeed, I agree. So tell us about the evolution. It's almost like a story where I'm a child. I want to hear more. Tell me more.
So when the cocoa beans went to Italy, the Italians invented the sorbet, but then because they realized that it's not sweet, they started to use it in cooking and savory things. And so there's a dish, tagliatelle al cacao, that's from the north, where they make the pasta flour with cocoa powder. And then they'll serve it with gorgonzola and then top it with toasted walnuts. In Tuscany, they make a chocolate pasta that they serve with a ragu di cinghiale, a wild tomato ragu. And my favorite, in Sicily, there's a sauce from the Enna province called schiabbo, which is very popular at Christmas time. It's a tomato pork ragu with lots of dark chocolate. The dark chocolate, just like that fruit in the cacao has so much flavor, good chocolate has so much flavor. So it really adds lots of levels of taste to the dish. And the Italians also, beautiful, exactly. And it's so easy to do. If in fact you don't want to make your own fresh pasta and you just use dried pasta, you can use dried pasta, put it into the water, and put a little bit of cacao,
very interesting,
right in the water. And the dried pasta, as it cooks, will absorb that and receive that wonderful, wonderful flavor. So they also, besides foods, what was interesting is just at about the time that chocolate was coming into Italy and becoming more and more popular, into Italy came coffee. And coffee, Italy was the first country to receive coffee from the Arab world. And so they thought, wait a minute, we like this chocolate drink, but we like coffee too. Let's combine them. And so clever Italians created many, many chocolate drinks. All of us probably have had cappuccino with a little bit of cocoa powder on top. They did so many other things. They made something called bicchierine, which means little cups. And that's a drink that was created in Piedmont, in Torino. And bicchierine is a layer of dense, sweetened hot chocolate, a shot of espresso, and then topped with cool foam. And the way that you're supposed to drink it is not to stir it in the cup, but to drink it, and it combines in your mouth. And It's served still today in a cafe called Cafe Bicerin, right in Piedmont, which was a place where ladies of the 1700s, the wealthy, would congregate because it was place that only hired women. In those days, a woman really wouldn't go out socially without an escort or a chaperone. And so this Cafe Bicerin only hired women. And so that was a safe haven for women to gather. And still today, there in Torino, in Cafe Bicerin, they'll serve it by candlelight. So it's just a wonderful spot to put on your must visit. Torino is a beautiful city, and to have a Bicerin in Cafe al Bicerin is absolutely
I totally agree. Bicerin cures everything. Whether you have walked, 15,000 steps, or you just want to admire the beautiful churches there, it is indeed a specialty that not only tourists but locals alike enjoy very much. And as you rightfully said, do not stir it, and most likely once you're going to drink it, because of the panna is on top, you might have a little bit of panna on your nose. That's part of the fun.
Well, it's not as thick as a panna. It's a cool froth, so it's even lighter. It's just it's like a milk. It's wonderful. But of course, there's maracchino, which comes from the color of the hat that was made in Alessandria, in another province of Piemonte. And Piedmont, has all of these inventions because that was the center of chocolate making back in the late 1600s, 1700s. It was the center. It is where, for example, a fabulous flavor, the combination of hazelnut and chocolate, was created. And that was created because of Napoleon. The Napoleonic Wars kept the chocolate from coming into Italy, to Piedmont. And in Piemonte, they have wonderful hazelnuts. So they combined the ground hazelnut butter with the cacao so they could create a new flavor, gianduia. And then they tested it at carnival time. They wrapped it up in gold paper. They made little tiny upside down canoe shaped candies, and then gave it away at carnival time in the 1800s to see if people liked it before they introduced it and started to charge money for it. And it was interesting because that's the first candy that was covered in gold, covered in anything. They used to sell it like jewelry in a jewelry store. You would just point to a candy and it would be put in a box. But this was the first time it was wrapped. And then it gave a big tradition of wrapping fine chocolate in gold paper. And so gianduiotti is a wonderful invention because of necessity. But then that sparked a love of the flavor of hazelnut and chocolate. And so other companies like Perugina, which is located in Perugia, or Ferrero Rocher in Piemonte. These are all candies, and the baci that were created is a whole hazelnut in hazelnut ganache and then covered with dark chocolate. And there's even a little love message inside, a little poem or a little message, which comes from the inventor, which was Maria Luigi, who was the wife of one of the partners of the original Perugina. And according to legend, she was having a little bit of a relationship with one of the other partners, and she would slip notes to him in the candy. Because the candy was so good, they all forgave her. And continued the tradition of wonderful messages inside each.
And then actually, if I remember correctly, because if we look at the shape of the Baci Perugina, when she first come up with the design, because Maria Luisa Spagnoli, she's also a famous designer, just seeing all the waste of the hazelnut ganache instead of just using the prettiest and the biggest. She called it cazzotto because it means a punch, because it reminded of the knuckle in here, but would you ever buy a piece of chocolate? It's called a punch. So, you know, this love affair gets sweetened the marketing campaign as well. It's just more palatable to, you know, to eat a piece of chocolate. It's called a kiss, right?
I mean, the punch of the knuckle, I guess, is the way, but also
Yeah, yeah. But it's the first thing that as soon as you know, we get the baci before even, it's kind of, I think, simultaneous. You put the chocolate in your mouth and you really enjoying it, and then read the love poem, and you save the ones that, you know, somehow speak to you, or the quotes you like the most. So I have a whole collection that and needless to say, I think these won't last too long, but they're right here. Sorry for the interruption. Let's
No, but, and speaking of baci and Perugina, in Perugina is in Perugia, in
Yes.
Umbria, and they have Europe's largest chocolate festival, Euro chocolate, and that's something else to look for in the fall if you're traveling in the center of Italy. It is worth going. They turn the streets in, they're flowing with chocolate. There are different stands to taste chocolate from around Europe. They do chocolate sculptures, chocolate carving. They have chocolate cooking shows. So it's really a wonderful, Euro chocolate is a wonderful excuse to make an extra visit to Italy. And of course, Perugia is a wonderful city, and while you're there, you can visit the baci factory, the Perugina factory, which is it's a fabulous museum, and walk through and see how they make it. And then there's a tasting at the end.
Actually, the Euro chocolate is going on as we speak. So maybe by the time we air this interview in a couple of days, we will have already the ability to see some of the pictures of this year's edition. And so baci, I remember when I was in Rome, there was also an exhibit at the Capitol Museums of all the marketing, all the covers, all the posters, and so forth. It's always been something that brings everyone back to their childhood.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And Dolce Gabbana did a designer's version, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, that reflected a little bit of the Sicilian flavors. So I had, I believe, a little bit of citrus, white chocolate, a little bit of citrus. So it's interesting to see also the partnership between these companies and designers wanted to design the bags and the chocolates themselves.
Speaking of Sicily, back when Piedmont was so important for chocolate, Sicily and Naples were very important also. Partly because in those days, way before, Spain was the first country that got chocolate, and they had colonized, they ruled over Naples area and into Sicily. And there are some very interesting chocolates in Sicily. Sicily, like the city of Modica, very important center of chocolate making. And in Modica, just like the ancient Aztecs and Mayans stone ground and terracotta ground the cocoa beans, they still in Sicily, like for companies like Bonaiuto in Modica, they still stone grind the chocolate. So there's like an interesting, like the difference between white bread and whole wheat bread, still a little interesting, wonderful texture to it. And they have some weird but wonderful things that they have done with chocolate since it was introduced down there. There in Sicily, there is a little tart like an empanada, the time of Spain, and it's called mampitaji, and it is a chocolate and meat pie. It's sweet, so it's a dessert, it's a sweet. And it was created during the time of the pilgrimages, the religious pilgrimages, to fortify the pilgrims traveling, to give them the energy of the chocolate and the meat. And nowadays it's still served as a dessert, and it is fantastic. In fact, if you weren't told what it is, you just think it's a fudgy middle, because the very finely ground meat just adds a richness to the dark chocolate. And then the other bizarre, weird but wonderful dish. This is mampitaji. Delicious. If you're traveling in Sicily, or there's a recipe if you want to make it yourself in my Dolce Italy Sweets book. But if you're traveling in Sicily, you'll definitely want to try it there. And then in Naples, there's a weird but wonderful sweet that is a must to have on Ferragosto, August 15th. And it is a dessert. It's chocolate eggplant. And it is eggplant, either slices that are fried or poached. Some people poach it in limoncello, some broil it, layered like lasagna. With, instead of the sauce, they put a fudge sauce, then the eggplant, and then sweetened ricotta instead of the ricotta for lasagna, candied fruit, more layers of eggplant, and then covered in this wonderful chocolate sauce. And it's eaten cold. It is fantastic. Very, very, very delicious, very unusual. And melanzane al cioccolato is a classic of the Amalfi Coast of Naples. And it's very funny. I put it into my book. I have a chapter called Weird but Wonderful. Desserts just so strange, but I had to put them in. And I did a TV show, and I'll never forget, the producer said, listen, Francine, we tried a few dishes. We love them, and we're going to have you, we want you to prepare this, this, and this. But then at the end, to tease you a little bit, we're going to say how terrible the chocolate eggplant is, because it sounds crazy. And I said, okay, but I'll bring a little bit. I'll make some and I'll bring it just so you can see it on air. She said, okay, but be prepared. We're going to tease you about it. And so I talked about all the wonderful things in the book. And then we get to the chocolate eggplant, and the host takes a little bite, and I can see on the cards, he's supposed to say, this is so crazy. Italy has wonderful things. Occasionally they lose their mind. But he takes a bite and he says, wait a minute, this is delicious. And he was so shocked, because it really is just a wonderful combination of, again, the savory and sweet, and the knowledge that Italy has about ingredients. Eggplant is such a nice neutral flavor that it absorbs and complements. And so it's kind of a nice balance between the sweetness of the chocolate fudge and then the
you have a beautiful picture in the book. So absolutely, it's definitely something that I would like to do it again. And because again, it is nice also to educate people. And also when you go to Italy, sometimes what I notice when I'm at the restaurant, because I'm always speaking on what other people are eating, and I feel a little sorry when I see people eating lasagna when they're in a territory where lasagna is not really the specialty, because sometimes the names are tricky, if you don't speak the language, or if there is no translation, because then if you go to the ones that have the menu in English, then you think they're tourists and so forth. But that's the beauty of traveling, going to the towns and maybe let the wait staff to tell you should try this because it's a specialty. And so the chocolate eggplant might make your nose go up a little bit until you try it. I'm like, please more.
It's the same thing in we were talking about Emilia-Romagna. Emilia-Romagna has a dessert, a chocolate dessert made with pasta. Torta ricciolina. It's called curly pasta. They take either in a pie, in a crust or not. They take the fresh egg pasta, don't boil it. They toss it with ground almonds, sugar, and cocoa powder, and then bake it. And the baking cooks the pasta, but then leaves the outer edges crispy. So torta ricciolina is a must try when you're traveling in Emilia-Romagna. Torta ricciolina. Yep. It is so delicious, with the crust or without the crust. Just that idea of pasta for dessert. And in fact, pasta for dessert is something that is very common. Like you showed some of the chocolate ravioli, which are very popular carnival treat. So there's so many great reasons to travel through Italy with an open mind and try other things. So I agree with you. The other thing is to travel at different seasons, because chocolate is something most people travel to Italy, I think, in the summertime, and that's not the best time for chocolate. Chocolate is fall, winter, spring. In fact, the chocolate companies don't even produce, most of them don't produce in the summertime. And I love Easter in for the chocolate. In America, we have the chocolate bunny, but in Italy, we have the chocolate egg. And sometimes they can be so big, they can be 5 feet tall, and a town will put it in the square and have a special celebration where everybody takes a piece. And the thing that I find very interesting is that in Italy, the chocolate egg can come with a gift inside. You can buy one for a man, for an adult man, adult woman. It can have jewelry, designer sunglasses, t-shirts, a cell phone, or you can go to your local chocolatier and with a special gift that you want him or her to put into the egg, and then they'll put make a specific egg for you. In fact, I interviewed a lot of chocolatiers throughout Italy about this tradition of people bringing something to put into the egg. And several people said that they often are given an engagement ring to put into the egg. And so Easter might be a time that's often associated with getting married. So I do love the Easter egg tradition in Italy.
So do you, and obviously, do you, have you ever, I'm assuming you have visited these companies, maybe you have collaborated with some of them. Can you tell us what other novelties should we expect from the chocolate factory? Because I'm assuming, as any other product, there are evolutions, there is research, there is attempts to come up with a new product. What can you tell us? What should we expect?
Well, one of the things that is very interesting is that Italy invented a few years ago something called latte nero, white dark, milk dark. Dark chocolate is just the chocolate and sugar. Milk chocolate is usually 1/3 milk, 1/3 sugar, 1/3 chocolate. And that's the way it has been forever, until an Italian, Slitti, said, wait a minute, what about if we don't do 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? What about if we give you more chocolate? And so they gave a higher percentage of chocolate, let's say 50% instead of 1/3, and then 25 sugar, 25 milk, or 70% dark, and then 15 milk, 15 chocolate. So that was 15 milk, 15 sugar. So that was latte nero, was a very important, and now everybody is copying this Italian invention. Now, just recently, the Venchi company, a company in Piemonte, Slitti is in Tuscany, in Piemonte, a very old, from the 1800s chocolatier, has created a chocolate that is 70% less sugar, but tastes absolutely fantastic. You cannot tell, because they worked for years on a sugar substitute that's totally natural. They created, taking the root of a plant, they created this sugar substitute that is just as sweet, but does not have that sucrose, not as many calories, not the sucrose. And unlike some of the sugars that are made from fruit, which is all really sugar, this is gentle on the tummy, but yet so delicious. And so I love one of my favorite companies, although I've worked with and adore there's so many special companies, Perugia, Amadei, Sliti, but Venki is the person in charge of flavors, is a particular connoisseur and has a wonderful palate. So I always love seeing what they come up with for flavors.
And I think Venki has a little treat also for our listeners.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you for reminding me. I'm giving many talks in the next couple of months on Italy, and chocolate is always weaves its way in. In fact, at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., in February, I'm going to be talking about chocolate history, and the audience will get a sampling of what Venki's wonderful chocolates. And so Venki has given your listeners a special family and friends gift. It's 15% off their online order at Venki, and all you put in the code is Venki, VENCHI, 4 Francine, Francine. So it's a special Venki for Francine, which they gave to the people that are coming to some talks that I'm doing in December. I'm doing a talk on desserts of Christmas, but then when I told them I was doing this radio show, they said, "Oh yes, please share it."
Maybe we have to so I told you that this was going to be a sweet episode, and now you just made the experience even sweeter. And maybe we'll if you're not too busy, I might ask you to come back so that we can chit chat about the holiday traditions. That is, again, probably another tour across different regions of Italy to reflect some of the traditions that maybe not everyone is familiar with, because we kind of are familiar with where our families are from, maybe if we married into another region, but there are many more. Anything else that you would like to share before we go into the closing? I know, again, that you're a very busy lady, and I don't want to overextend my welcome.
It's always a delight chatting with you, and I am so happy to always talk about Italy. I just think it's a country that is endlessly fascinating. The 20 regions is only the start. The hundreds of provinces, as you mentioned earlier, have so many treasures, and chocolate is just one of the wonderful ways that we can see Italy's amazing talent and creativity. And so there's a lot to visit and a lot to taste. And I've shared a recipe that you'll be able to.
Yes, absolutely. So you've been very generous with the torta tenerina. Tell us a little bit about where the recipe comes from. I'm going to try to pull it up so that it stays in the recording, and then we will be able to share it afterwards in the comments. But the torta tenerina, first, let's get a little more hungry by looking at the picture. And beautiful picture. So the tenerina tender, I don't know, it's probably referring to both the inside and
torta tenerina is created in Emilia-Romagna, and it was created kind of by accident. Instead of flour, the chef put in potato starch, but then found that it was fantastic. It stays very fudgy in the middle, and the top gets a nice crinkly topping that almost crunches. So it's really lovely. It's totally flourless. So if you have celiac, you can absolutely make this. You can use the potato starch or cornstarch, and it's got only 5 ingredients. So this is a place where you should really use a good quality Italian dark chocolate. The Italians, like all the countries in Europe, have to follow the EU rule that they not use anything but cocoa butter in the chocolate. It could only have 5% of something else. And so chocolate in Italy is particularly wonderful. Unlike in America, where we don't have that rule, and sometimes there'll be other things in our chocolate beside chocolate.
Well, Francine, again, you've been very gracious with your time, with your recipes, with your knowledge, and I look forward to connecting with you again, maybe during the holidays again. But unfortunately, our time together today is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop. It's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org and you can click on the Italian Radio Hour. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. I would like to profusely and sweetly thank my guest for today, Francine Segan. And again, amazing, wonderful books. You can eat the pictures. Our sponsor is Istituto Mondo Italiano. And until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.